Welcome. My name is Peter Strong. I'm a professional psychotherapist specializing in mindfulness therapy, and I offer online agoraphobia therapy. Many people suffering from agoraphobia really struggle to get the help that they need simply because it's so difficult to leave the secure zone, the comfort zone of their own home to see a therapist. So for many people suffering from agoraphobia, the online therapy option is absolutely essential. And that's what I've been trying to provide over the last 10 years or so now, is a well-tested mindfulness-based approach to overcoming the anxiety of agoraphobia. So how do we go about doing this during these online therapy sessions? Well, the first thing is that we must continue to work on facing the anxiety. We must not indulge in avoidance. Avoidance is usually fear-based. So if you engage in fear-based avoidance of anxiety-producing situations, that in itself will feed the underlying anxiety. And so that's not recommended. What we encourage in mindfulness-based therapy is that you begin to face your anxiety, but in a very strategic and careful way, so that you're able to train with that anxiety and overcome that anxiety in progressive steps. So this is called mindfulness-based exposure therapy, and it's extremely effective. But the important thing is training. You must train before you do any kind of exposure challenge. So, for example, if you are working on trying to overcome anxiety going to a mall, then the way we go about this is I would have you imagine going to the mall and look for any anxiety reactions that get triggered. When you identify the triggers, we use those strategically in our training. So you will replay the trigger scenes in your mind to trigger that anxiety, but now with the added component of consciousness. You're doing this yourself with conscious choice. You're doing it on your terms instead of just being thrown into the anxiety-producing situation. That's very important. So we deliberately bring the anxiety into the mind in order to start working with it using mindfulness. So how does mindfulness reduce anxiety? How does it help? Well, there are several ways that mindfulness helps remove anxiety and neutralize it. And the first method that we develop is called developing equanimity towards that anxiety. So this is where you learn to observe the anxiety consciously, mindfully, without becoming reactive, without becoming overwhelmed by the anxiety, without falling into a stream of reactive thoughts that feed that anxiety, without blindly falling into beliefs about yourself that feed that anxiety, and so on. We learn to sit with the anxiety without reacting. So this begins to train the mind out of those habitual patterns of reactivity that all feed that anxiety. So we learn to become the observer. And that observer becomes more and more free from the anxiety. The more that you face that anxiety in this conscious, mindful way. So that's developing equanimity. the first factor in mindfulness training with anxiety. The second factor, the second method, is one of developing compassion towards the anxiety itself, seeing the anxiety as being like a child, as a mental state that is itself suffering and needs a parent to help it resolve its suffering. So you become that parent, the observer, or true self, as we call it in this style of mindfulness therapy that I've developed over the years. You become the parent to that emotion which is like the child. You develop that relationship by staying present with the anxiety, consciously and with compassion. And the stronger that relationship is, the faster the anxiety heals. So you're really developing an internal relationship that is essential for healing emotional suffering. I call this the true self, little self alliance. It's like really good parenting. When that relationship is strong, it's based on consciousness and love, then the child grows up in a very healthy way and suffering is greatly reduced. When it's missing, then the child does not grow up in a healthy way and there's a lot of suffering. It's exactly the same with our emotions. If we do not have a strong, mindful relationship with our anxiety, then that anxiety cannot heal itself. It begins to propagate instead and create more anxiety through the processes of reactivity, like avoidance and catastrophic thinking and so on. So we build this internal alliance, the true self, little self alliance. When that is very strong, then the emotion begins to let go of its own suffering. And we notice the anxiety begins to reduce in intensity until it disappears completely. And that's when we can imagine going to the mall or other challenge that we are working with and not feel any anxiety at all. That's our goal. We're training the anxiety to heal itself. We're creating new pathways in the brain that heal that anxiety. When we've done that thoroughly, then we go and do the challenge. We go to the mall and we stay present, we stay conscious, watching for any anxiety that gets triggered. And now your training will start to take over, because the moment you make conscious connection with your anxiety, if it emerges during that challenge, then your training begins to take effect and it starts to neutralize the anxiety on the spot. We might then do a further round of mindfulness training, meditation essentially, after the challenge on any fresh anxiety that was triggered. We repeat the process. We build equanimity and we build internal compassion and developing that relationship of true self, little self. When you repeat this over and over again, what you end up doing is creating very strong neural pathways that resolve the anxiety and also strengthen your identity as your true self, that which is like the parent, is not anxious. Now, the more that is strengthened, the more you become your true self, the stronger that alliance, with the little self, the anxiety reactions. The stronger that alliance, the faster the anxiety heals. And so you get this positive feedback that leads to stronger and stronger pathways of resolution and healing, and you basically develop more and more confidence or freedom from anxiety. So if you do it in this very strategic and detailed way, you will start to see dramatic changes quite quickly. I have worked with people who have been a prisoner of their house for sometimes as many as 10 years, who would be impossible to think about going to a mall or going to a cinema or going anywhere really outside of their comfort zone. And they have completely transformed their anxiety, and they find that they are able to go to the mall, to go to a cinema, to drive a car again, after years of not being able to drive. So agoraphobia is entirely treatable as long as you take a strategic approach to healing the individual anxiety reactions that make up that agoraphobia. So if you would like to learn more about mindfulness-based therapy and you like the idea of online agoraphobia therapy, then do please contact me. Let's schedule a trial session so you can see for yourself how this mindfulness therapy approach works. It is very effective, and people start to see changes within weeks once you start applying this mindfulness-based exposure therapy strategy that I will be teaching you. So please reach out to me by email if you're suffering from agoraphobia and you are looking for online treatment for that agoraphobia. Thank you.